This is an interesting one. Unfortunate, interesting question, unfortunate nonetheless. Is revealing that a student has an IEP a FERPA violation? Yes. I mean, I'm going to read the rest of the scenario, but uh, that's part of the confidentiality aspect of student records because it required your consent as a parent. It's not something that is available for all students. All right, there's a big difference there because anything that requires your individual consent as a parent for your child makes it different than every other student because every other student doesn't have a disability and every other student doesn't require an IEP. So therefore that required your consent. Therefore, your consent is attached to evaluations, it's attached to education records for them to even initiate. And because of that, that becomes personally identifiable to your child and personally identifiable to the point where it becomes a student record. FERPA is the Federal Education Records Protection Act. So therefore, that is personally identifiable information to your child. That is not something that is available to all students because it required your consent. Therefore, yes, they should not be talking about your child's disability at all. In fact, I've had more than a few clients that, due to the nature of the child's disability, a very high functioning autism, for example, the parents didn't even let their child know that they had a diagnosis and wanted it not to be shared with him because, parents have different routes. Okay. So I no judgment. I have a daughter with autism. She's 19, classic autism. And so therefore, I don't hold the same position of keeping things from my children. But at the same time, I understood where this particular family was coming from and why they chose to go that route. And so they, on the IEP team, made it very clear that his diagnosis was not to be discussed outside of the IEP room, and that all of his services and accommodations would be cleverly provided and not overt. He needed social emotional, he needed communication, little bit of academic accommodation, but by and large, where he required specialized instruction was in the area of socialization, social emotional learning, those kind of things. Okay, and so the parents felt like approaching it that way would be better for him. And so therefore, that was part of the IEP team determination to keep those things private. And they did. And it was successful for this child. So the reason I bring that up is that anybody who claims, and this is the thing about schools, I have schools claiming all the time that you have no access because of FERPA, that you can't come and observe in the classroom because of FERPA. They pick and choose what aspects of FERPA they want to sit there and tout and believe. But I can tell you there is no expectation of privacy inside of a school. It has to do with student records only, not seeing students, not observing students, not walking the hallways. None of that has anything to do with FERPA whatsoever. The other thing is you as a parent every year, for all parents, regardless of disability, have to sign consent that you give permission for them to record your child. All right? If FERPA was truly a thing, then you wouldn't have to give your permission, would you? But that's the thing. You give your permission because even recording your child is not an education record. It does not magically turn it into an education record unless it's specifically personally identifiable and necessary to turn that video recording of your particular child on a particular day and an instance into a education record. That is the only thing FERPA does. It's an Education Record Protection Act, okay? So as long as the school is not dropping your child's IEP from a plane, as long as they're not divulging this kind of information, which is your daughter was at a unified track meet last night, and the program from the hosting school had it clearly stated for our school's participants to see that your daughter was on an IEP. Maybe it needed to be provided to the host school, but I felt it wasn't necessary to have in a program for all to see, and that is absolutely true. That was a mistake, as it was an error. Now, what can be done about it? Not much, because FERPA The schools like to use it as some grand obstacle against you to be able to access to school and have transparency. But in reality, there's no punishment mechanism for them violating not anything real. I mean, this is the punishment, guys. Don't do that again. All right, not like HIPAA. HIPAA has real consequences, licensure, money damages, things like that. But HIPAA has to do with private world, and FERPA has to do with the government world. And government doesn't hold itself accountable in a lot of ways. So FERPA, even though the Records Privacy Act works most of the time, anytime it doesn't work, there's nothing really you can do about it to force it to work, other than don't do that again. And this is what I would tell them. Guys, you need to find a better way to, you need to ask, first of all, why is it pertinent for another school to know your child's status? And then the other thing is you need to make it clear that it is not appropriate for them to share your daughter's status. You have not given your consent to do that unless they have a reason to do it. Okay? But outside of that, no. And when I say outside of that, I meant outside of you having a conversation with them. They should not be just unilaterally determining who gets to know your daughter's status. But like I said, this is one of those things to where schools will pick and choose how they apply FERPA. But as a parent, please understand that being able to observe your child, being able to walk the halls, being able to go to assemblies, being able to see your children outside, go on field trips, if FERPA was really that huge wall of protection for privacy, your kids wouldn't be able to do any of that stuff. It is only applicable to student records. And so even in a special education classroom and observing what instruction is being taught, you're not being given that child's program. You're not given that child's IEP. So you can hear instruction, guys. You can observe, all right? And so anytime you hear these tit for tat excuses about, FERPA this, remember what I said. We need to start fighting back on this aspect to how they're abusing FERPA whenever it's convenient for them, like in your track situation, but then on the opposite end, using it as some huge wall and obstacle for parent participation and trying to avoid transparency.